Welcome, everybody. Welcome to ICF Academy, Session 2, Episode 2, Season 2. My name is Gabrielle Rail. You can call me Gabs, and I am one of your hosts today. And boy, am I excited about our topic, camp innovation, flipping the way we think about preparing and planning camp. And with me today, we have behind the scenes my good pal, River. I might be referring to River. Just know that that is a person from Venezuela. And he'll also be helping with some of our translation and tech support. And River, we are so grateful to have you. And we have a wonderful team at ICF that's here to help get knowledge to everyone around the world that's trying to make the world a better place for kids and families. And we're here because we love what we do, but sometimes they come with headaches. And I think that today's speakers, you will see, looks at the jobs that we do and looks at it in a different way, opportunities where problems might arise. Next slide, please. So we have people from all around the world, and I would encourage you to, in the chat, share where you are from. So, it's just exciting to see that we have people from Venezuela, from Bali, from the United States, Canada, Russia, Ukraine. It is just so exciting. So please do share where you are from. It just gets that energy going for the day. Next slide, please. So a little bit of housekeeping. This will be translated, thank goodness. So it's helpful for all of us if we keep ourselves on mute so we can properly hear the speakers. We also recommend that clicking in the view button in the top right corner of your screen and clicking on speaker view will really promote the visual of the person that you're going to be seeing. The session today is primarily in English. But please do use your own language in the chat. We have some translations that we will be including in the chat. They are creative translations, so we use a lot of online translators, so our apologies. At the end, we will have a breakout room so that you can meet other people and discuss the content that was shared this morning or this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you are. And they'll be hosted in English, Spanish, and in Russian. There's no formal breaks, and you'll notice just below it says 9:45, meaning an hour and 45 minutes that we get to spend together. But please do take breaks, grab yourself something to drink, relax, but we won't be taking breaks, but please do feel free to do so. I'm going to pass this little housekeeping bit off to Lisa.
Thank you very much. Спасибо большое. Мы хотим рассказать вам про некоторые правила этой конференции. Во-первых, пожалуйста, держитесь на замьюченном формате, чтобы слышать хорошо докладчика и вас не было слышно, то есть включите выключение микрофона. Используйте вид докладчика, чтобы видеть, кто говорит. В целом эта конференция будет на английском, но с переводом. Чат вы можете использовать на своем языке. Заранее просим простить нас за какие-то погрешности в переводе, и вы можете присоединиться к комнатам на английском, испанском и русском. К сожалению, формальных перерывов не будет во время конференции, поэтому мы вас просим позаботиться о своих потребностях, и мы закончим приблизительно где-то к 9:45. And I pass it to River.
Gracias, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. Rápidamente, algunas reglas de juego. Por favor, manténganse muteados durante la sesión hasta el momento en el que pasemos a las salas separadas, y utilicen la función de vista del presentador, ya que le va a ser más fácil seguir quién es la persona que está hablando. La sesión va a ser principalmente en inglés. Sin embargo, pueden escribir en el chat en su propio idioma. Hay varias personas que hablamos español en la presentación, y vamos a hacer una traducción final luego de toda la transcripción. Se mandó en el chat también lo que es el guión de la presentación para que puedan irlo siguiendo. Si de repente se pierden, ahí pueden ayudarse, pero pedimos disculpas por adelantado, ya que mucha de la traducción se utilizó usando Google Translate y esa clase de dispositivos, entonces puede que hayan algunos pequeños errores. Van a haber salas separadas de ruso, español e inglés para la parte interactiva. En ese momento sí les pedimos pues que liberen sus micrófonos para poder conversar, y no van a haber ningunos momentos formales de descanso, así que bueno, cada quien tome en cuenta eso para cuidar sus propias necesidades. Vamos a estar terminando alrededor de las 9:45 hora de New York. De vuelta a Gabs.
Gracias, River. I really appreciate it. And we're going to be moving on to our next slide. So what is our plan for today? For today, we're going to be looking and joining with John from Camp Reimagine. We're going to explore the process of Camp Reimagine and then get curious about what does that mean. We also have invited camp pros, who we'll introduce in a moment, to respond to John's content. So it helps us to think about how can we apply this type of method to our own camps. And then further, we'll have that breakout room discussion that we were all talking about in Spanish, in Russian, and as well in English. And then some final highlights at the very end, some final thoughts for today. So we invite you to get curious. We invite you to also share your thoughts in the chat. At some points, myself and John will be asking you some questions, and we hope that you'll respond in the chat so that we can all benefit from each other's learning. Next slide, please. I'd like to invite my friend John to the stage in a moment, but just before he joins me, I want to say that I met John just before the winter holidays. We had never met before. Gwen was so excited about the work that he was doing that she saw on the summer camp's Facebook Pro site. She reached out to him and she said, "Gab, you need to meet John." And when Gwen says you need to meet somebody, you take that seriously. And boy, was she right. John is one of those individuals that takes a moment and thinks intentionally about every single person that is in front of him and every single person that is missing from this space. He is very intentional about the way he wants to approach camping, and he's very intentional about asking great questions from individuals to get the most out of what we can do with this wonderful world of camp. And I'd like to say personally, John, I'm so excited for your presentation today and very grateful for your presence. And take it away.
Thank you so much. And hello, Camp World. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I am so excited to be here and just feel blessed by the chance to share this time with you. If we can go to the next slide, please, and I'll get us going. So my name is John, and I am live with you from New York State, where I serve communities as the Director of Impact for an organization called Great Work, Inc. Before my current role, I worked with the YMCA for over a decade. And while serving, I've used different approaches to serve communities through programs in urban, suburban, and rural settings, including some international program work. And something that I've discovered enriched those efforts was being able to cross-pollinate ideas. And that's the concept of taking thoughts, learnings, programs from different settings and applying them in other settings to enrich each other. One of my areas of self-reflection was that I discovered I served more as a bee, or moving between different places and sharing ideas rather than a tree, especially in camping. And the term tree meaning being rooted in one specific camp location. And camps I've been part of in the past, they're referred to as like camp legends, the person who's been there for decades. And something that I've continued to realize is that we need both bees and trees in the world of camping. And we can go to the next slide. I'm going to pause and ask a question of the group here. So often, when we share camp, we share about what our camps do. But I want to ask the question, if you're willing to share, why does your camp exist? Not what does it have, not what are your main programs, but why does it exist? And I'll pause for a few seconds to see if we can generate some, there we go, to teach kids, challenge and grow. I bet as answers continue to come in, we're gonna realize different perspectives and some of the connections between them, and it may help deepen our understanding of why our own camps exist. At the end of the presentation, I'm also gonna ask you to think back to your original answer and see if it's changed since that time. And see how it might be used as a guide for how you approach camp this summer. And we can roll to the next slide. Today, I'm going to share about why our program Camp Reimagine exists, about our pilot weekend that we had in December to test some ideas for it, and what we are aiming to do with our camp as a result of our pilot weekend. And on the next slide, I have mapped out. Awesome. So let's start with why. Our aim as an organization is to have everything we do connect to why we exist. Not just some things, not just our big things, but even the small details of camp connect to why camp exists, and our small things that we do as an organization connect to why we as an organization exist. If we look at society today versus society 100 years ago, a lot has changed. We moved from the Industrial Revolution, having factory workers, to having a variety of careers that people can pursue. And now we have the ability to connect people through technology, which has changed in many ways how we interact. We also have more college-educated individuals than ever before. However, if we look at youth development today versus 100 years ago, it's hard to see the same changes. Schools 100 years ago had classrooms with teachers in front of students giving lessons. And we primarily in schools in the US use the same model today, less interaction, more teacher-student based. But we want to ask the question, is that what's best for students? Is that what teaches best? We believe if you look at camp, it's hard to find similar advances in the model we use today compared to the model we used for camping 100 years ago as well. But if the needs for campers have changed, the model likely needs to change too. And that's what we're exploring. However, what's not changed is the importance of youth connecting with each other and with the environment. If anything, we need camp more now than ever because of those reasons and the ability of camp to impact their relationships with each other and nature. On the next slide, if we can transition to that, I'll share about another layer of our purpose. And that is that camp has deeply impacted young people for over 100 years. It's inspired leaders and built lifelong relationships, and it's been a light that countless kids have been able to look forward to summer after summer. It's connected them to the natural world. However, for us in the US, if we look at who camp was designed to serve 100 years ago, it was much different. the foundational constructs that was built upon, it's impossible to deny in looking at that history is that it's rooted in, for, and from the experience of upper and middle class males, particularly white upper and middle class males. Camp Reimagine aims to challenge the status quo of camp with an emphasis on those camp norms that stem from and are deeply rooted in and were created by white supremacy culture that existed when the camping industry was established. Our hopes is that camps will better reflect and be inclusive of the communities they serve on all levels. Who is at camp has changed and has room to change even more. Camps now widely serve more gender identities, races, cultures, and communities than they did when they began, which once again, if the model hasn't changed, how can we push the envelope for that as well? So to support meeting kids' needs and making camp inclusive of all, we believe that there's an urgent need to advance what equity, access, and youth empowerment look like in camp today. We believe that in order to accomplish that goal, there needs to be new lenses and cross-pollination of ideas, experience, and perspectives to enrich the conversation. These new lenses and our philosophy can come from voices that are traditionally marginalized and not heard, rather than the typical trees of the industry that you hear sharing often. So our starting point was hosting a conversation to explore these beliefs and test these ideas. And if we get to the next slide, I'll share a little bit about how. To summarize, we're doing this work to connect camp professionals doing work that has an emphasis on traditionally marginalized groups to deepen their relationships in order to increase access, inclusion, and equity through overall combined efforts, a whole that's greater than the sum of separate parts, with the purpose of better meeting the needs of youth today. And doing so in a way that builds off of why we're doing it and not just doing what's typically been done before because it's the way it's always been done. In our next slide, I'll share about our pilot weekend. So from December 2nd to 5th, we hosted 19 individuals from different parts of camp throughout the United States in an area called Denver, Colorado. The weekend experience was called Camp Reimagine. So it was the name of a moment when we gathered people as well as the name of our overall work. It focused involving people with camp mindsets who are doing work in areas related to the beliefs I just outlined that are equity focused, youth centered, and relationship focused areas of their work. And I'll point out that if you look at the photo of some of the folks gathered in the upcoming slides and compare them to a lot of conferences and speaking events that you'll see in the US, there's definitely a striking difference with the representation and the involvement there. And our next slide. So the aim was to get people not traditionally in the room together at the same table talking about camp. A hypothesis was created to test the belief that if we change who was at the table, it can directly impact our ability to create new models and approaches to serving underserved communities. Our assumption was that the answer exists within those who identify with traditionally marginalized groups, and that we can dive deeper into exploring thoughts and conversations through a diverse group's involvement, and folks who are doing similar work in separate areas. We also wanted to focus and highlight folks who normally don't have voices in conversations. And we can go to the next slide. So we thought about who to have in the room, and then we explored the status quo of how conversations and gatherings for camp are typically held. Typically, a lot of conferences can resemble what schools look like, with a speaker in front of a crowd talking about camp. But the listeners can often get lost during those conferences. And our goal was to have something that, rather than was goal-based, outcome-based, and agenda-filled, like a lot of trainings and conferences are, to allow more freedom for the participants. So we asked the question, how do we elevate camp professionals rather than having them get lost in the crowd? And it became clear that the typical approach to gatherings needed a new model. So we wanted to test out a new model and think about, if we take care of people in different ways, if that would result in us getting better results from conversations and them having more takeaways from their time together. We also wanted to test how to gather those folks and seeing how they would respond if we don't tell them what to do, and trust them to explore meaningful topics and learnings collectively, rather than ones outlined by us as the host. And on our next slide, although the image on this slide is a little small, I can share it in the chat later on, but it outlines the agenda for the weekend. That was the agenda and the map, and it was our model. We tested what could happen when the following ingredients exist in a space. So our only expectation of the 19 individuals gathered was that they eat, they share space and fellowship, and that they iterate. And that word iterate means that cross-pollination, sharing ideas, also asking questions, and being okay with not having immediate answers. With the ultimate goal of, just because we don't have an immediate answer to a challenging question, doesn't mean we need to settle for the status quo indefinitely. All of those ingredients were founded on a concept of radical trust. So not having an agenda, not having goal-based gathering was on the concept of radical trust. It meant that we trusted those in attendance to do great work without oversight, micromanagement. It meant that we believed that they know how best to share ideas, move work forward, and connect with meaningful people. And also meant that we held space, so we hosted folks together and prepared to watch as they moved their ideas forward with the resources of having dynamic colleagues in the same room with them. So that participants were able to propose their own discussion topics, their own times and locations to have conversations on a dry erase board in the lobby of the building that we were in. We gave one example and prompt to start the weekend for a conversation, and then they took the lead from there. They created their own topics, own conversation times, and a lot of the time the conversations had a start time, but not a specific end time. We also explored how to give everyone involved in order to allow them not to get lost in the crowd or feel like they weren't involved. Give them VIP treatment, very important person treatment. And that meant, whereas a lot of conferences you have to pay to attend, we actually honored them for their time by paying them, not only to be there, but also provided funding for transportation, also transportation to the airport, and paying for the time there. We provided meals, accommodations, customized snacks and gifts based on individual preferences. So we sent a survey out ahead of the gathering to see what their favorite things were, and we had their favorite things ready for them. We also hosted happy hours, hiking outings. Typically when I've gone to conferences, I've been put up in your typical hotel room, sometimes sharing the room with others, but participants were provided their own large rooms where they had their own space to get away. Some who had kids at home and are used to being around crowds really enjoyed having that time to themselves. And other aspects that allowed them to be involved and have that VIP treatment were direct communications when possible, and connections prior to the event and their arrival. And that's our main mapping. And if we go to the next slide, I'll share about the key ingredients. So we believe those key ingredients, that eating, iterating, sharing space, combined with the VIP treatment and radical trust, would lead to an atmosphere that would be most impactful. All those things done before we even have the conversation. So not just jumping to a conversation about reimagining camp, but setting the stage first. If the stage is set right and the right people are in the room, then the conversation is going to flourish. We were testing these ideas, beliefs, and ingredients, and mapped out some things that we wondered going into the weekend was, would there be enough time when you talk about building relationships, having people take lead through radical trust? That does take time, and relationships take time. And we wondered, would only a couple of days produce long-term, effective, positive relationships? And would people have meaningful takeaways from the weekend with such a short amount of time, without it being programmed, without us telling them what to do and when to do it? We also wondered how folks would respond to radical trust. We were paying them to go to a city that some of them hadn't been to before. Would someone just decide it was a tourist trip and not participate in any conversations? We didn't tell them that they had to be anywhere at any specific times. We just asked to share meals. And then we wondered, would key ingredients set up a successful atmosphere, and what the results of our hypothesis would be. Our hope was that if we did those things right, it would result in folks thinking differently about camp, and that those thoughts would lead to different combined actions that can change individual camps and help change the camping industry. And I think I'll pause from that phase of the presentation.
Yeah. John, wow. And such a leap of faith with the program that you did. And I think that some of the takeaways that I got from what you were talking about, and I know we're going to continue, some of the takeaways, obviously, school systems have influenced how we train our staff. As sort of the typical individual that stands in front of everybody else, the person that seemingly has the most knowledge is the one that shares. And my takeaway from what you were talking about is, how do we create space for people, especially people that don't typically have a voice, to share their thoughts, their ideas, their experiences, so that it can inform the larger group. And I think one of the things that's hard for camp directors is that we get nervous and anxious if we don't program and plan every single second and minute, because we know that once camp starts, can be very overwhelming. And the more information we can, quote unquote, pump into people, sometimes that makes us have a false safety net, that they're going to be secure and okay. So I'm going to challenge this group right now, and to get inspired. Next slide, please, River. To get inspired by some of the things that John was talking about. And I'd like you to answer in the chat, how could we reimagine staff training? What would it look like if we applied radical trust to our staff training program? If we created start times, but not end times, if we prioritized taking care of one another, how can we, what would that look like? What would that shift? So if you would feel so inclined to share, what would that look like if we applied some of these concepts that John is talking about to our staff training? What could it look like? We'll take a moment to get some of those comments going. I see that some people had suggested maybe even in the next International Camping Congress that this could be interesting. And perhaps a little bit of less structure, a counselor-led. I love that idea. More breaks, playtime. Also, we know that building strong relationships with staff members at the beginning helps them with the opportunity to problem solve during the summer. less talking perhaps from the person that is on stage or at the front, break it up a little bit. I love that. Inviting staff to come up with their highlights and lowlights at the camp, and trusting them to design and build the activities. So I love that, Kiki, having a reflection piece of drawing from staff members' own experiences. Tell me about a time when camp was positive for you. Tell me about a time when camp wasn't so positive, or it could equally be a school school experience. I think we have Trudy, I think allowing the staff providing some of the training to one another, acknowledging that everyone is an expert in something. And we know that some organizations specifically create time to help support staff members discover what they're experts in, and support them in sharing that information. And remember, sharing information does not mean that you have to be in front of everybody. It can be in the small group conversation. It could be over tea. So many great information that's happening right here. I'm loving the buzz. So thank you for that little mental break and sharing the information. I'm going to bring John back on for some final thoughts, and then we'll be heading on to some of our camp pros and some of their thoughts on being innovative at camp. John, next slide, please.
I am still taking in the chat right now as well. Such exciting things for our
so true. I'm also great stuff. We'll save the chat so that we can have this content, but same.
Absolutely. And I'll just continue to press and encourage as well. One of those underlying aspects of the why that I mentioned earlier too, right? Connecting things with that why, and elevating voices that don't typically have a voice. So even in those trainings, we typically hear the directors, leadership staff, who are those other voices that typically aren't heard, those outliers. And sometimes they're the same ones that we might discover have the most amazing breakthrough concept and idea that we just haven't heard. There's so much richness just in groups that we can tap into. But anyway, sorry, back to the sharing.
It's wonderful. It is truly a natural it's a natural resource. And the wonderful thing about this natural resource, the more we tap into it, the more we ask questions, the stronger that natural resource goes. It actually gets stronger the more we use it. So I love what that insight that you just brought to the table.
Absolutely. Internal cross-pollination, and seeing what the camping network overall, how can we cross-pollinate those staffing training ideas with each other too. And yeah, anyway, so we wondered, what if I spoke earlier about our hypotheses or things that we tested, and we wondered, if I sum it down to a formula, if we do X, we assume Y will happen. And we tested that with our gathering and with those concepts. And here's what we found. We found that when we changed the nature of the room, who was at the table, we got folks who are doing work that's focused on equity, inclusion, and youth voice. When we change the nature of the room, we change the nature of what safety, belonging, and relationships meant. And there's a lot to unpack there. And unfortunately, I won't have time to unpack all of it right now, but it was amazing to observe and watch that process evolve. We also found that a new model for camp conversations yielded both continued meaningful conversations and relationships amongst camp professionals, where we still have folks who participated in the weekend, connecting with each other, doing work with each other, sharing ideas, sharing trainings that are coming up that they can participate in. It resulted in a network of professionals doing challenging work who are now elevating each other. We also learned that this model can inspire how we approach serving youth today in different ways that are relationship-centered. And for our next slide, if we can go to that. One of the big aha moments that I'll share that led to how we're applying this learning at our camp in New York is actually a story, and I think he might be on this call, but I was walking to breakfast on the last day of the weekend with someone there named Todd. And as we were walking and talking about the weekend, he was thinking out loud about leaving and said, looks like camp is over, huh? And I myself, I'd been doing some work to put the weekend together, and I hadn't even thought about or connected the idea that the weekend Camp Reimagine experience itself could be a model for ingredients to an actual campers and camp model and experience. But when we went back and looked at the ingredients we were intentional about for the weekend, it made sense in regards to, again, connecting with why we put together this weekend and why at their roots, a lot of camps exist. Building relationships, empowering others. And if we seek for campers, if our why for campers, a big part of it is for them to build relationships and to be more empowered as a result of camp, it makes sense that the two could be similar experiences. And it makes sense that as well, and I think a beautiful thing about camp compared to the education system and to some other systems is it takes campers out of their typical environment, plugs them into a non-typical environment where they have more of an ability to learn, discover, explore than they might in their typical day-to-day. Camp can accomplish a lot more in less time. And that's something that happened for the folks that were part of this weekend. They learned more in less time by being unplugged from their typical workspaces, their typical routine, and sharing time with people from different backgrounds and settings. What we observed as well as a key element that made the weekend successful was that, again, before we got to the relationships part, the sense of safety and belonging, folks being able to be vulnerable and share and able to make mistakes without being judged, was essential in allowing the relationships that were built to flourish. And on the next slide, I have a tool. It's something that for some camps I've worked with before is a popular theory that's called, and this discovery aligned with it really well. It's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you haven't taken a look at it before, I'd highly encourage you. There are different phrases that go along with each level of that pyramid. But what the pyramid suggests is that there's a certain order that we as individuals that our needs are met. The base layer need to be founded before you can get to the top of that pyramid. So people can't feel fully emotionally safe without physiological safety. They can't feel deeper belonging if they feel insecure. It's more challenging to gain esteem without a sense of belonging. And camps can be a great place for that top of the pyramid, the self-actualization, and unique compared to other settings. But if we're aiming for any of those top parts, but taking the bottom parts for granted, might actually be doing a disservice. And really, it's doing the bottom pieces really well so that we can get to the top pieces and prioritizing those and figuring out what that foundation looks like and strengthening that foundation in order to strengthen the top parts, or else we may discover that the relationships, the empowerment are struggling, not because of the programming and the things that we're doing that are focused on them, but it's hard for a kid to feel empowered to discover something new if they're breaking their leg safety-wise, or if they feel like they're being they don't fit in, like there's hate speech being used against them in camp, like their counselors not listening to them or not helping them feel included in their group. So if those things aren't happening, it's hard for a camper to leave saying, yeah, I have more self-confidence. I had this paradigm shift in my life because of camp. I'll also share that what happens at one camp impacts all camps. If a camper has a safety need or doesn't feel like they have a sense of belonging in a camp experience, they're not just, a lot of times families don't look at that, and a camper might not look at that as this specific camp was bad, but camp overall is not a place for me. And that's not where we want to be as individual camps, and especially as individual camps, but also as a camping movement. So I'll move on from the hierarchy of needs, and I want to spend some time on the next slide about how we found that it was actually this, when building those steps, that pyramid, we found that small things that we did were crucial in creating the atmosphere to make the big things successful and with meeting needs. The small components of the weekend amplified it to set the stage for the trust that was essential to build relationships that were essential to allow for the iteration and cross-pollination of ideas, and for those things to take place in a short amount of time. And I'll outline a few of those small things that weren't on the previous slide too. So I did mention that we had communication before the event itself. That involved a Zoom call where we spoke with folks about a month before they arrived in Denver. We sent out surveys, collected bios and about me bios so that they could learn about each other before they arrived, and offered support before arrivals. I'll pause to also ask, what can that look like in camp? How do we allow campers to get to know each other, get to know their counselors before their first day? And what does that interaction before the first day look like, so that by the time they arrive, there's already some essential elements of trust built into their experience? And then when they arrived at the event, we were intentional about, it was not our event, or it was not our event as Great Work Inc. It was our event as all the folks there sharing space together. And while beforehand I helped prepare things, I was there as a participant, primarily, which involved asking for help. And for example, like at the airport, we could have easily picked up everyone from the airport to get them to the event space, but instead we empowered some folks who were involved to gather people together to get them from the airport to our site location. All of those little things were designed so that the weekend wasn't centered on us, and also because the help genuinely helped. And making sure that we were all at the same level. And once again, the question for camp is, how can we empower campers and have them be on the same level of influence and importance as us as staff and as directors? I spoke about the VIP treatment. We had some little things like ingredients for meals, where we didn't tell people that they had to cook for each other, but or had to do anything. We provided all the meals, but we also had ingredients so that during that eating time, when people could share and gather, if they wanted to cook something for each other, they could. And that did take place as well. And that was actually one of my favorite breakfasts. Chris, who will be speaking later, cooked with a few other folks one morning, and it was delicious. And I think better than most of the Denver food I had, even though the food in Denver is quite good, but they were excellent in the kitchen too. And it was just a nice time to gather, and another beautiful component for relationship building. And after the event, we just continued to network and made sure that we did what we said we were going to do. as far as providing continued compensation for people's expenses for their trips back home. And we're going to continue to explore how to continue to engage everyone who was involved in the weekend. So again, the wondering is how often do we emphasize small things in camp and leverage their importance over the big things? It's nice if we have a big moon bounce. It's nice if we have the best high ropes course, beautiful cabins. But what are those small moments in camp that make the magic of camp happen, that really truly serve why camp exists, that emphasize relationship building, empowerment, youth voice and choice, that elevate the campers who don't typically have a voice in camp? What are the small components of what we do and of how we approach camp that make the big things and their functions work successfully? So those things served our why with building the relationships, and more essentially, I think they were more essential key elements than the other components that I shared earlier. And I'm continuing to wonder, not only what are the most meaningful things, but where do the most meaningful things take place in experiences? And then I will conclude on our next slide here. So I shared a little about our approach to our upcoming summer and how we're applying the learnings from the pilot weekend to our summer camp specifically. We're also going to be applying some learnings from the weekend to future gatherings that are similar to the one that we had. That's another sharing for another time. What I would like to reflect on and share is that, and emphasize, is that we would not have arrived at these thoughts and questions for our camp this summer had it not been for the process of cross-pollinating ideas. And we would not be able to move forward effectively without a diverse array of meaningful relationships. So we are already reaching out to folks who were involved in that weekend, as well as some additional external voices to help us have multiple lenses looking at our camp program this summer, from policies to program to marketing. And something that this group also does great with as well, having different ideas and lenses from an international scale, which is amazing and inspiring. And we're looking at continuing to have that happen with an emphasis on voices that typically aren't heard too. All of that being done and centered around the starting point of why camp exists. So we're not looking at our summer camp saying, all right, we want to have the best waterfront, and our camp is about having the best waterfront, and we have the best sports, and we have we want to share with families why they're sending their kids to camp. Not you're sending your kid to camp to learn this skill, but you're sending your kid to camp to build relationships, be empowered, have a life-changing transformational experience, and connect deeper with nature and others. In the earlier exercise, I asked folks to share why their camp exists. And I want to ask and invite you on the journey that we're on right now, which is, all right, now, how can we have the things we do this summer better serve why we exist? Not only better serve, but how can we have everything we do, from the structure of our dining hall and meals, cabins, schedules, how can those serve more directly and better why we exist? And does why we exist, does that have room to evolve? Is it because we've always existed this way, or is why we exist relevant to the kids now in front of us in our communities today? And does it, why we exist, serve them in the most meaningful way possible? Or do we need to challenge the status quo of our why? Can we challenge overall how the structure of our camp further supports why we exist.
Thank you so much, John.
In there, yeah, that's I'll end there for now, and I'm excited to see the discussions in the breakout groups, see what others are doing, and thank you for the opportunity to share.
It's just wonderful, and to me, we're going to get a little bit more into this with our next respondents to your information. But I just want to say thank you so much for presenting that. We're getting to the heart of what camp does, and sometimes we forget that those little steps is what is important to make those meaningful connections, and that we do have to acknowledge that not everybody feels welcomed at camp. And I think that's hard for camp professionals to hear, because we try so hard for that to happen, but the reality is, when we have to acknowledge it, and then once we acknowledge it, we can make changes. And it definitely starts with our why, and that can be our compass. So thank you again, John. We're going to head on to our next slide, because our Camp Pros team, we have a great panel today. We have Lisa from the Ukraine, Chris from the United States, and Kiki from Bali to share some of their ideas and how they are flipping the script a little bit at their camp to be innovative and make meaningful connections with their campers and with their staff. Lisa, I'm passing the floor off to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa. I am Program Director of the camp based in Ukraine. First of all, thanks to John for his hard work on this important topic and discussion of reimagining camps. And thanks to everyone for the opportunity to speak on behalf of our camp and Ukrainian camp community. Firstly, let me introduce my camp. The camp philosophy is based on 5 values: English everywhere, lifelong learning, have fun, be yourself and respect others, and we are support and motivation. These values help us build the atmosphere and content for which campers want to return to that camp again and again. We know that children seek knowledge only when they have significant adults around whose example they would like to follow. So we are looking for individuality and freedom of expression, and it's one of the key principles of our camp. We embrace any difference, like blue hair and different sneakers, raw food diet, and collecting water drops, because we believe that difference is our strength. And our mission is to show campers that they are creators of their lives, fans of lifelong learning, and they're ready to take responsibility for their lives and change this world, starting with themselves. Next slide, please. When we talk about the new concept of the camp, our camp is based on the following points. It's program, staff, and daily atmosphere. Next slide, please. Every year, our campers create around 40 different projects aimed to solving urgent problems for the benefit of themselves, the country, or even the whole world. Campers develop a concept and implement a project by themselves with minimal adult intervention. And this allows them to learn how to try, make mistakes, turn their ideas into reality without fear of disapproval, criticism, or rejection. At camp, we create an environment of trials and mistakes, showing by our own example that any of ideas has a place to be, that any idea could work with support, and there are people around you who can help. For example, this year's summer program at our camp will be about creating and developing community to show that each of us is the creator of their environment. Next slide, please. On the next slide, I'm going to tell you about the atmosphere, about staff. Staff is the core thing to change when we talk about reimagining camp. One of our values, embrace diversity, and it's the most important value that we follow when we recruit and train staff. We must gather in the space different people who will be the voices of different groups, and who will create a space for development, acceptance, and importance. We think that in new world where our campers grow, we have to teach how to listen, hear, and see different people with different biographies, interests, opinions, hobbies, ages, genders, skin colors. Talking about atmosphere, which you can see on the next slide, the whole process of campers' experience at camp is accompanied by the idea that we trust the campers. And it's a crucial trust. Even if they betray the trust, they should know that here they can have a chance for improvement and they can get the trust back. Thus, campers appreciate what is happening around and the contribution that staffs give. In everyday life, we do not use the words children and adults. To unite everyone at camp, we have campers and staffs who are equal in rules, opportunities, and are the creators of everything that happens in the camp. For example, even our new camp rule system was developed with the campers. We were gathering campers to discuss what are the rules that they would like to follow and how to create the safe atmosphere at camp. Also, we think that the concept of finishing camp should be reimagined too. Next slide, please. 94 of campers at our camp returned to us for the next seasons and sessions. For example, during 3 interseasonal camps, among 64 campers, around 54 have been at camp before. And we think that camp life does not end when the camper returns home. We create a community that will support the camper in the pauses between camps, including communication with staff, special clubs, trips to other cities, and meetings. We believe that modern concept of the camp is that camp is not just a time of session or the time of being at camp. The camp can become a full-fledged part of life as long as child needs it. And we think that camp can become a space where everyone can come for support, acceptance, understanding, and importance. So thank you for your attention. I hope to discuss more of it during our breakout rooms.
Oh, thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate it. I just a couple of notes that I just loved what you said. Difference is our strength. That you clearly are also trying to create that space of elasticity and learning when it comes to campers, that we're there to teach campers about trust, and that it's okay to make mistakes, and that we will give you opportunities to learn what trust truly means. And by opportunity, you give those opportunities to the campers about talking about setting their own guidelines, community guidelines, safety guidelines, so that they are part of that process. Truly leading by example. And lastly, that last piece about camp does not end when our session is done, that we are a community. And I think a lot of camps, this is something that we want to do, but sometimes struggle to do. And just seeing that your 94% return rate, this is something that is of course what you're doing is creating a strong community, and dare I say even a family. So thank you so much for your work. I truly appreciate it. We're going to be moving on to our good friend Chris from the United States to chat a little bit, not only about perhaps their organization, but also their experience with John, because you got to do Camp Reimagine.
Yeah. Really, really excited, and also really excited to hear John talk about the experience from his perspective, because I have my own perspective that I think definitely supports some of it, but I would love to, I'm excited for him to hear it as well. So My name is Chris. My pronouns are they, them. I run a summer camp called Unirondack. I've been working there for 14 years. My camp was founded in the 1950s by an organization, or by an organization called the Unitarian Universalist Confederation. Unitarian Universalism is a vague, progressive set of ideas, religion of sorts, but that's really just the roots of our camp. One of the things that I think fits very nicely with the ideas of Camp Reimagine is that our camp is pretty dedicated to continuously questioning our purpose and how we do things, which has meant what our camp stands for has changed a lot in the last 60, 70 years. So we are vaguely guided by progressive ideas. And one of the things that we have sort of specialized in that is serving LGBTQ youth. Some of the practical ways that happens, I put in this slide. We are one of the first, or the first in our country, to include gender inclusive cabins for all sessions for all age groups. But really, and having gender inclusive spaces throughout. We don't have single gender spaces. But the more important piece is creating and sustaining dialogue around gender and identity. Interestingly, though, I actually really think that this has just become a model for, or it has become a metaphor, right? So queerness as an idea has risen to the top, and I think it's because it's a metaphor for how we approach the work we do with youth, which is to break the rules sometimes and throw out the status quo. So I'll go to the next slide here. So so we have an overarching commitment to questioning the status quo. What that looks like is often embracing absurdity, whether it's in our programs or with our campers. We front load conversations about our values and let those be the things that guide the what we do. Specifically, we give that conversation to our campers and to our staff members, to our first year staff members. One of my favorite things to do when a staff member comes to me and they say, I have this situation that I'm facing, I don't know what to do. And I put it back on them and say, what do you think you should do? I can give you an answer. I've done this a lot. It doesn't mean that my perspective is going to be inherently any more valuable than yours. Give me what you think you should do. I'll give you what I think we should do. Let's come up with a plan for that together. And it creates a lot of newness and is more conversation focused. It is more work, and I'll talk more about that when we get to how Camp Reimagine's work kind of connects to ours. And actually, I'm going to jump back a little bit to that embracing of absurdity. Somebody mentioned earlier that we often that it feels scary to give up control. Like when we are camp leaders, we want to have we joke so much about like we got to stay on schedule, right? Like we all do this in the camp world. And I'll give you one glimpse into a moment we had last summer that I think is the metaphor for how our summer camp tries to run, which is we have an afternoon activity spot, and we plan every activity spot throughout the week. My program director came up with an idea to not plan one of the days. Just don't plan it at all. Then, right before announcements, just made up program names and then said the name of the counselors that would be running them. They then stood up in that moment and explained to the campers what that program was going to be. A program name they had never heard. They did not know they would be running it. They, on the spot, came up with the idea. Then we ran those programs, and the real the real ending of this story is that when we told the campers the next day, they couldn't tell the difference. They didn't know that in those moments, those counselors were being entirely put on the spot and asked to create something in the moment. I mean, it was like complete absurdity. And I think when you invest enough time in spontaneity, cool things can happen. So, and then the last piece is that by questioning how we do things so much, it is often seen as unproductive because it can lead to a lot of time spent thinking instead of doing. And I think that something that the Camp Reimagine model tries to do is to see thinking and iterating as doing. It is work. It is productive. So, yeah, we'll go one more slide. Yes, so what we'll do differently. This is something that I'm going to go behind the curtain a little bit because John and I had conversation around this. And what is interesting is if you're going to be a cross-pollinator, like, if you're going to be a bee, as John likes to be, and I do too, and I think that all camps will benefit from sharing ideas and sharing notes and trying to make our camps better, because I actually strongly agree with what John said, which is that if a camper comes to my camp and they don't have a good time, it's possible they'll go to another camp. It's also possible they will never go to another camp because we, as an industry, we have a reputation. So there is a want to come up with conclusions and clean notes of like, we did this and it worked here. Here is a replicable model. And that's difficult when it's so based on the ideas that are created. And the best metaphor that I can come up with, and then I promise I will give some actual concrete examples and not just live in the philosophy, but when folks, and I'm going to use LGBTQ or queerness as my metaphor, because that is something that is deeply important to my camp. But folks often ask us, how can we be better allies? How can we, right? Like, what are the things we need to know? What are the things we need to do? And on one hand, I appreciate that. But on the other hand, it's really about like embodying that acceptance and having it within you and letting it sew itself into the threads that make you who you are as a person. And then anything you do is going to be accepting, right? So again, that's very like warm and fuzzy, and we need some more like concrete examples. So it was a reminder that our process is valuable. It was also a very important reminder because the focus of this Camp Reimagine was diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was deeply important to see other thinkers around the room and realize that we all face a collective exhaustion in doing this work and being told that this work is extra, right? And in one hand, using the hierarchy of needs, I understand we have to make sure that our campers are safe, right? But a camper not feeling like they are accepted for their race is unsafe, right? Like one could very easily make an argument that is at the very base of the hierarchy of needs. So an exhaustion that we all face in having being told that diversity, equity, and inclusion is just extra, or it's something that would be nice if we can do it, but we got to make sure the ropes course is safe. So combining those ideas. The other thing is commitment to the long, recognizing that some of this work is going to take 5 years and 10 years and 15 years, and that and that's okay. And then the last thing is, even as creative as I try to embolden my staff to be, I've taken away ideas of realizing that I'm still thinking within the confines of my camp. We're going to start hosting winter camps. We close up in the winter. And I always thought that camp couldn't happen. We can't have camp because our camp closes in the winter. But plenty of other camps host at other sites. What is camp? To me, camp is the values we create. So anything we do, or the values that we try to encourage, any activities we do in any location are going to line up with what it means for us to have camp, as long as those values are happening, and they can happen at a different location. So yeah, we're already creating winter camps, and I have new camp directors I'm bringing in. I'm like able to give my staff members new positions and new like upward mobility within the organization by just saying, here, take it and run with it. So yeah, hopefully that's enough of a philosophy meets some hard ideas, while recognizing that the hard ideas are sometimes not the point. But I also understand their value. So that's my piece.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you for bringing, these values. Sharing our values truly helps us, I feel, grow our roots, and get stronger as an organization, while we also have these cross pollinators that arrive, to help, contributing to showing the things that we sometimes miss. And for me, what I love is that day where the staff members, were clearly trusted with a day that was not programmed, and was, staff just rose to the occasion and got to be very creative. There's obviously strong trust that was built before that day happened. And I feel that, where you had said before, break the rules. For me, the breaking of the rules just sounds like you're actually chipping away constantly to get to the purpose of your organization, which is serving your community. And sometimes I think camp professionals get a little protective because there's experience behind them of how things have worked and how things have done. But I think if we can soften that and truly look at what is our core value, what is our why, as John was talking about, which you clearly do on a not only a day-to-day basis, but a moment-to-moment basis, and you encourage it. And I think that's where the trust comes from. Just wonderful. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Unfortunately, we only have one more of our panelists to join us today. And all the way from Bali, we have Kiki. Kiki, I checked out some of what you were presenting, and I'm so excited to hear about what you do with your organization. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, Gabs. I think before I start, I'd like to just invite everyone to stand up and maybe stretch a little bit. I've seen some people kind of like, oh.
I love it. I want to take that surfboard out as well.
Take 5 seconds just to stretch a little bit.
Such a great idea.
Okay.
Kiki, that was a good one there.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this community and for creating the space to share and to learn together as a global community. I'm here to represent Green Camp at Green School Bali. My name is Kiki, and I'm originally from South Sulawesi, which is another island above Bali. And I've been part of the Green School family since a decade now. Actually, I'm wearing a couple of hats at the school. I'm the head of Green Camp, and I'm also part of the community team at the school. And my main role is to help connect and build relationship within our community. Can we please go to the next slide? Thank you. So I would like to begin by sharing the story that that I love so much telling people about how Green Camp came about. So we are part of Green School Bali, and that was founded, the school was founded in 2008 by our founders, John Hardy and Cynthia Hardy, who came to Bali more than 40 years ago and fell in love with the people and the beauty of the island. John Hardy really disliked school. And when they had kids, they didn't want to send their kids and go through the normal conventional school that you and I probably went through. And one day his wife invited him to go and watch a documentary. It's called The Convenient Truth. Maybe you guys have seen it. And that day literally changed everything about their lives. And the idea of building Green School was born, and the camp was created a year after the school opened. Sorry, I have to tell you that story because I just loved how it all became a reality. So why Green Camp? We imagine a world with a flourishing community of learners connected to nature and to each other and the world in making the world sustainable. And our camp designed and built with an intention to redesign the way we deliver education to children and adults through immersive experiential learning. We believe that every human being has the capacity to be change makers in our own way. And we, as a community here, we are fortunate enough to have the privilege to be part of that process in cultivating their basic human skills and at the same time empowering them to nurture their own skills. Ultimately, in my opinion, the only way we can achieve that goal is by actively engaging children and adults and actually allowing them to have the real experience to be connected with each other and the planet. Next, please. The implication of Camp Reimagine process for Green Camp are perfectly aligned with our vision, our mission, values, and our program framework. Our mission is to immerse campers in nature-based and transformative learning adventures to inspire them to live more sustainably. When putting together a camp program, some of the most important elements that guide us in designing and building processes are our values, our community, staff, campers, internal, external stakeholders, campers-centered focus. It's always in our mind, our impacts to ourselves, others, and the planet, focusing on process over product, and our Green School learning pedagogy, real, relationship-centered and holistic, experiential and evolving, authentic and interconnected, and local to global. Next, please. I would like to highlight our values, which are inspired by permaculture ethics. Some of you might be familiar with people care, fair share, and earth care. And these actually align with the Balinese traditional philosophy, Tri Hita Karana, which values care for ourselves, care for the planet, and care for the people. Next, please. So with the values in mind, we created the 4 pillars of learning. The core of what we do is sustainability. When we talk about the big word or the big word of sustainability, this doesn't only refer to nature, obviously, we all know that, but it also focuses on the society, the economy, and the well-being of the people and the planet. I just want you to picture this. As soon as you step into Green Camp, all your senses will immediately be inhibited by a deep sense of connectivity to nature. Starting from your surroundings, from our surrounding side, we're surrounded by lush natural environment, beautiful river. And then our camp building structures are are made mostly built on bamboo and natural materials. The food that we harvest from our organic garden, it's all vegetarian. The compost toilet, which is always be a hot topic at the camp, and the community around us. All of these things remind us of how everything and everyone are interconnected. Next, please. What we expect our team and our campers to go home with is, number one, develop a sense of responsibility and independence, grow compassion and kindness towards themselves, each other, and the planet, a stronger sense of appreciation and respect for themselves, each other, and the planet, build resilience and perseverance, and nurtured relationship with each other and the world around them. At the end of the day, our intention is to plant the seeds so that they grow resilient roots that would allow them to provide services to others and the earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kiki. And clearly very passionate about what you do and your predecessors. And, you know, I often think about schools. I think a lot of camp directors know teachers that work at schools. They're perhaps your staff that was the career that they took afterwards. And, you know, there's a reason why teachers, for the most part, are very frustrated with the school system, because it's not necessarily putting campers first. And with what you were talking about, this intentionality of helping campers connect with themselves, connect with nature, but learning truly as a whole, not just with information, but with heart and with experiences and with connections. You know, all of this that you know, that you were talking about, that Lisa was talking about, and Chris, for me, the common thread is that constant thought about how can we do this better and how can we build connections. And it's not about the type of activities we have, but it's about the intentionality behind that. And I just want to thank you, Kiki, for bringing us to your part of the world in the sense of your organization and the impact that you have on not only clearly the children, but also your staff members. And of course, those staff members and campers are taking that good knowledge and experiences outside. So thank you so much. I can't tell you, this is one of those experiences, ICF Academy, where time just flies by, and because it's just such great information and sharing. And so now we have the opportunity to actually share what we have just heard, our thoughts, our fears, our excitement about how can we be more intentional with creating a safer space for our campers and our staff members at camp. So I'm going to invite two of my friends on the stage with me, Lisa and River, to go over a little bit of the breakout guidelines or support systems. River, would you mind putting up our slide so that we can just show some of the information for the guidelines, and then you two wonderful individuals can translate for us. So just a couple of notes. So you'll be able to join a breakout room in your chosen language that you'd like to follow along in. We suggest that you do a 10-second introduction, maybe your name and where you're from. We also suggest that you have your cameras on to create a little bit more of a dynamic feel. And to help things, the discussion flow naturally, we ask that people, listen, ask questions, comment, on what people are saying. And we will have, we're going to be going now, we're looking at time right now. So let's just say we will join back at 9:35. And so that is approximately 12 minutes from now. I'll pass the microphone off to Lisa.
Thank you. Сейчас у нас будут комнаты для обсуждения, и мы предлагаем вам следовать некоторым правилам. У нас нет определенного плана для этих комнат, но мы предлагаем уделить 10 секунд для того, чтобы представить себя и откуда вы. держать камеры включенными, чтобы мы видели, кто вы и ваши эмоции. И чтобы это все было естественно, то очень важно друг друга слушать, задавать вопросы и комментировать других, чтобы услышать всех. И мы предлагаем 10 минут для обсуждения в этих комнатах. And I pass it to River.
Thank you very much, Lisa and Gabs. So, para los que hablamos español, las líneas a seguir para ahorita las salas separadas, nos vamos a dividir en unas salas, va a haber una sala en ruso, una en inglés y otra en español. No hay una agenda específica para estas salas, la idea es que se pueda abrir un espacio de conversación ameno en el cual podamos compartir ideas. Se sugiere unos 10 segundos de introducción por persona, en el que se diga el nombre y el país, y tener las cámaras prendidas para hacer una conversación más dinámica. Luego, para que la discusión fluya, pues siempre tratar de escuchar lo que la gente quiere decir, no hablar unos sobre otros, y hacer todas las preguntas que se quieran hacer en el chat. Mantener los comentarios siempre breves, de forma tal que podamos escuchar varias voces, y vamos a tener aproximadamente unos 12 minutos para poder tener esta dinámica. Back to you, Gabs.
Merci, River, and merci, Lisa. Group, our breakout rooms will pop up shortly. River, if you can go to the next slide. Just a friendly reminder, you can record, and we do ask you for our host to record the breakout rooms because this is just such great conversation.
John, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Hey, yes, I can.
My name's Charles, and I am from Canada. I just want to do a quick introduction. I really want to thank you for speaking today. It was a really good kind of different look at some of the camp stuff. I love how you guys kind of came together, and I want to hear kind of more about the premise of why you started the Camp Reimagined, meet and greet.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely answer that. I'll give the others in the room a quick chance to do an intro too. And then I'd be happy to circle back on it.
For sure.
Hi, y'all.
Hi, my name's Joan. I'm also from Canada. I'm right now near Toronto, Ontario, for those of you who are somewhat familiar with Canada. And it's very snowy here today.
Sorry, hi. I'm Anso. I'm from Quebec in Canada. I'm not a camp director or anything. I'm a staff member at Gabs's camp at Camp Poirot. So I don't know if you can hear me correctly, but yeah, I'm just here we have like kind of a similar approach with our campers.
We're back.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm just basically here to learn about everything, and it's very interesting. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Jackie, and I'm with ENSO, and I'm basically here to learn about this as well.
Got a good group from Canada in here. Lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Charles asked the question earlier that I'd be happy to answer and then just open up the floor too. So the organization I work for now is called Great Work Inc. And recently purchased where I'm at now. It's 100 acres of camp land that previously was with the YMCA for 100 years. So it's a 100-year-old property, YMCA camps. It was sold due to the pandemic. And now we're the new stewards over this land. And asking the question, how do we use this land best in service to youth throughout the New York City and tri-state region, especially youth who would not otherwise have an outdoor camp experience. And so that's with our camp program, that's our one of the hopes from Camp Reimagined was to have those ideas that we could apply into that camp setting, while also helping to strengthen and influence the camping industry overall. With that concept of, what hurts one camp hurts all camps. What benefits and what we can learn from one camp can benefit all camps too. So when the camp is stronger, we're actually stronger. And sorry, I think someone's in the waiting room here. Let me admit them. Here we go. But yeah, I'd love to hear, why don't we popcorn thoughts? Who has just a random thought, wondering, what are you thinking, wondering, questions?
John, first of all, thanks very much. And I guess my question goes to the ongoing nature of Reimagine. How do you see this process continuing, if you do, and on what sort of, I know you don't want too much structure, but how do we get to a place where this conversation is dynamic?
Great question. I think so. A few short-term and long-term goals. We want to have more gatherings and continue to build and strengthen the network of camp professionals, and figure out what those gatherings look like. Sorry, allow me to just allow a few more people who are in the waiting room in here. Here we go. All right, they're in. So host more gatherings, get in while our first gathering, as Chris earlier framed it, a lot of the focus was on diversity, equity, inclusion, which is is a big social issue that we face in the US. So it makes sense that that's something that we want to push the envelope for. But one of our reflections afterwards was that even though we were intentional about having multiple voices at the table, there were still a plethora of voices out there that we didn't have present even at this event. So figuring out how to, in future events, when we talk about the camping industry at large, how to have voices for differently abled campers present at future engagements, and how to support their work and their efforts and figure out what inclusion means in other dimensions of diversity. And there's a lot to explore and unpack there, because our specific camp land that we are now stewards of historically served communities throughout New York City. They're very diverse communities when it comes to cultural, racial diversity. So that's what our camp-based work has an emphasis on right now. That's our area that we specialize in. So it made sense a little bit that our first event was focused in that field. And however, we want to explore other things to focus on too. That's our function as well as an organization. The cool thing about the 19 folks who were part of the event is while we'll kind of nourish that atmosphere that they were part of, but they've started to connect with each other. And that was something that we were hoping for, where we have two folks who are hosting their own conversations this month, reconnecting with the people who they spent the weekend with to continue the conversations they had. We'll probably do some, for lack of better framing in words, like alumni gathering, so that when people who spent that time together can see each other in person in the future. But I imagine we'll have some more cohorts that will do some projects with the cohorts. There's a lot that we can do, and we're still unpacking because it happened a month ago, and with the holidays, we're now in the unpacking phase, and we'll likely have some more of like updates on our website about future gatherings and more definitions in those updates.
I landed in the room late. Where did the funding come to help this group come together initially? Yeah, we're privileged where we actually have a foundation that helps facilitate our work. So Great Work Inc. is connected to the foundation that was able to support these efforts. And that's one reason why
we're able to and excited about doing this work and piloting this work is because we have that financial ability. But the ultimate hope is that a lot of funders, a lot of donors, when they see something new happening, they want to be part of it. So while we have great work as our initial donor and to help launch and pilot things, if we do things right and do something that's changing the industry and being really impactful in camp, rather than having to approach funders and donors, the hope is that they'll want to approach us in order to be involved in the efforts. But we have to produce something good that they want to be part of first, not make promises first and tell them that we're going to have promise-based programming. So it's a backwards to some of the traditional funding sense that I think you might find.
John, I'm curious, you mentioned that when there was the three things that were really important and the small bits that made up those things to make the session a success. And I'm wondering, you mentioned like having the bios that you sent out to everyone, but also you said you did questionnaires ahead of time. And what were the questionnaires about? What were you looking to collect from people? And did you get what you were expecting, or did it turn out to be different?
Great question. Let me recall. The questionnaires almost work twofold. Like the bio asked folks like, hey, what do you want to talk about and share and learn from your time here? So that was both for us to learn and kind of get a pulse of the group, as well as our chance to see their chance to see, okay, these two people want to talk about these things. Like, let me make sure I connect with them and spend time with them when I arrive. So they had a sense of who they were and what they were about prior to arriving. Another part of the questionnaire was, what's your favorite food and snack? And we did. Everyone was of age, so we provided adult beverages too. So like, what's your favorite adult beverage if you have one? If you're stressed, what helps out in stressful moments? And then when they arrived, like each person had their own individual like baggie of treats, and I think so our breakout room's closing in a minute. I had a countdown thing coming up, so might have time to answer one more thing or hear another thought.
Just want to thank you for everything that you've been doing, and it gives us lots of stuff to think about as a camp that's 100 years old with lots of structure. So it's a whole other way of looking at it, and we're all, I'm sure, really excited to look at this. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, thanks for being part of it. Quick thing that
No
popped
problem.
in my mind too with the survey. I am exploring how to connect with campers ahead of our camp this summer to see also what their favorite things are and how when they arrive on their bunk can be a custom-made thing for them to help set the stage for them when they arrive. I think for
Fantastic.
2 seconds. Thanks, y'all.
Hola.
Hola, Majo. ¿Qué hubo, Pablo? Tiempo sin vernos.
¿Cómo estás?
Buenas, señora.
Samir escribe por el chat. Hola también. ¿Cómo estamos? Mucha gente de México. Bienvenido, Emilio.
Es lo bueno.
Muchas gracias, hola.
Vamos a ver, todavía sigue entrando gente por aquí. Jesús entró, pero no tiene cámara. Bienvenido, Jesús. Está trabajando, muy bien. No te preocupes, Samir. Cualquier cosa puedes escribir en el chat. Samir no se puede conectar ahorita con voz y cámara. Y ahí tenemos a Jesús. Bueno, bienvenidos a la sala de español. La idea, pues no hay una agenda específica, no hay una presentación en esta parte, solamente para compartir un poco lo que vimos y lo que pensamos y lo que creemos, un poco para arrancar o para hacer lo que dirían los americanos un kick-off de esto, pues siento que cada vez más el movimiento de campamento se ha ido mudando hacia esta visión un poco más centrada en el aprendizaje, más centrada en qué es lo que necesita el campista y qué necesita el staff para crecer, para aprender. Lo que me pareció interesante de esta sesión en particular es la forma tan intencional en la que lo abordan y lo radical de dejar a un lado por completo el programa y volvimos.
Listo, volvimos.
Sí, bueno, México y Venezuela representando aquí, ¿ah? Claro que sí, claro que sí. Muy bien. Bueno, eso, lo que decía, lo radical que es de verdad pensar de último en el programa y pensar primero en por qué estamos haciendo las cosas. La verdad que no suena tan radical después de la experiencia, pero sí es un concepto dentro de todo moderno y nuevo que es muy bueno ver cómo cada vez se está colocando más en papel y menos en palabras. Ya no es nada más algo que decimos, sino es algo que la gente está colocando en papel y está transmitiendo cada vez más formalmente. Jesús pone, ¡woohoo! Imagino que por el comentario de México y Venezuela representando.
No sé si les pase, pero creo que el desafío al que nosotros, al menos, nos hemos encontrado por acá es el que quieren aprender, ¿sabes? O sea, como que hay aprendizajes que se dan de manera muy orgánica y que qué padre, pero creo que hay una saturación tanto emocional como digital en muchos participantes y el desafío está en querer que aprendan de manera diferente. Entonces, eso para nosotros ha sido como, porque ideas puede haber muchas, pero pues cuando llegas y esta posibilidad de reinventarse, se limita mucho a lo que el participante te pueda permitir hacer, ¿no? Entonces, ahora, ese para nosotros ha sido el desafío.
Sí, claro, 100%.
Sobre eso, por ejemplo, por lo que dijeron de la institucionalización de los parámetros aquí en el chat, o esta como sobrecarga como emocional o digital. O sea, creo que sí en el campamento tenemos como una oportunidad muy grande de reinventarnos y de aprender nuevas cosas, pero creo que algo que al menos yo siempre me propongo antes de un campamento es como dejar las expectativas un poquito de lado, porque a veces puedes aprender tantas cosas o tienes como esta sobrecarga, como dice Majo, que no te permites como realmente vivir el momento del campamento, que es muy inmersivo. Entonces yo creo que si, por ejemplo, les quitamos un poquito o ayudamos a remover estas expectativas, creo que es más orgánico, un poquito más espontáneo, como se mencionó en la charla de Chris. Y en general creo que es como más fructífero a que tengan como esta carga tan grande.
Sí, sí, de acuerdo. Me pasa mucho también que cuando hablaban de inclusión y de lo importante de la inclusión, que fue como un tema bastante transversal, el admitir y el aceptar la diferencia. eh, a mí particularmente me pasa que con nuestra cultura latina a veces se nos hace un poco más difícil. No sé si en México es igual o si la experiencia de Jesús sea la misma, pero hay veces que los conceptos cuesta tanto ir contra a veces digamos, el estatus preestablecido, la expectativa preestablecida, pero la visión de por qué estamos haciendo esto, de cuál es la razón de ser detrás de lo que estamos haciendo, nos ayuda tanto a ser inclusivos. Si mi razón es ofrecer oportunidades de crecimiento para niños, pues no importa mucho cuál es el background o la orientación o las diferencias que puedan existir, el propósito está ahí y entonces la misión es ajustarse a cómo cumple ese propósito y no hacer hacer lo que venimos haciendo estándar, pues es más fácil innovar y cambiar y adaptarse a lo nuevo. Jesús levanta la mano.
¿Cómo están? ¿Qué tal todo? Bueno, fíjense, yo estoy de acuerdo mucho tanto en lo que dice Majo, River y Emilio, ¿no? Pero me voy a ir más por lo que dice River, ¿no? Sí, sí nos cuesta salir un poco de ese status quo preestablecido, también bueno, algunas razones de, digamos, logística quizás nosotros tenemos aprendida. Pero yo creo que para nosotros en este caso uno de los retos sería reentrenarnos para aceptar esa posibilidad de innovación, porque como tú bien dices, tenemos una receta, tenemos muchas veces un guión en la cabeza y sí, lo dejamos ser orgánico, ¿no? Pero me gustó mucho el ejemplo que utilizaron de dejarle al guía, al counselor, que de repente se encargue de una actividad no planificada. Eso está buenísimo. Pero tenemos que tener ciertas competencias para poder lograr eso de manera mucho más, vamos a decir, mucho más rica, ¿no? O sea, si a mí me colocan a hacer de repente escalada a última hora, debería poder saber hacer escalada. Entonces, pero eso de saber hacer escalada no es otra cosa que parte del entrenamiento a saberlo hacer de todo para poder en el momento preciso dejarme llevar por la situación y ser un poco más abierto a la actividad que me toque, por decir algo. Entonces, la cosa sería cómo nos entrenamos, cuáles son las competencias que queremos tener, porque sería un buen punto de partida, actividades como esa, ¿no? Pero sí, estamos entrenados de una manera, nos hace falta aceptar esa posibilidad de innovación al momento, por dar un ejemplo, ¿no? Entonces, yo creo que el entrenamiento de nosotros, los que trabajamos en campamento, pues, tiene que ser un poco más hacia esa área, pero para poder lograr realmente llegar a la innovación como nos la están presentando, por ejemplo.
Antes, Sofi, levanta la mano.
Hola, soy Sofi, soy de México. Y bueno, algo que pasa mucho nos cuidamos mucho de los espacios libres o que no tienen como una planeación tan establecida, porque casi siempre esos espacios son los que pueden generar algún accidente. Casi siempre cuando los niños están solos o cuando tienen pues un espacio más de recreación sin una actividad establecida, un juego exacto, cuando están, por ejemplo, a la hora del lunch, a la hora de la comida, es cuando se puede dar ese espacio para que hagan otras cosas que, como no están controlados, pues pueden causar accidentes. Eso es como que lo que me causa un poquito de choque, porque pues el control nos genera una seguridad de que están haciendo algo y de que están completamente supervisados y sabemos exactamente, pues ya conocemos la actividad que se está haciendo. Sin embargo, pues también está esa parte de innovación y de darles un espacio para la creatividad, para su expresión. Y creo que estaría padre encontrar alguna forma de hacer como una tipo de libertad controlada, no sé, como tener, como dar un día dentro del campamento, un espacio en el que, no sé, un día antes, unos cuantos consejeros se junten y planeen espontáneamente una actividad divertida para el día siguiente. Un día de, no sé, piratas o algo que se les ocurra en el momento, pero que puedan rápidamente pues platicar entre todos para darse cuenta de que sea algo seguro, algo padre de hacer y que sea posible. Y así de cierto modo sea algo espontáneo, pero también que se pueda platicar para que podamos asegurarnos de que sea pues algo seguro para todos los chavos al mismo tiempo.
Sí, de acuerdo. Sin lugar a dudas, esa base de seguridad de la pirámide que mostraba John en la presentación es muy importante. Nosotros en Venezuela manejamos mucho una pirámide en la que la simplificamos y colocamos seguridad, diversión y aprendizaje. Queremos llegar al aprendizaje, pero sin seguridad y sin diversión no somos un campamento. Y la seguridad es la base porque si no los papás no van a mandar a sus niños. Se nos está acabando un poco el tiempo, Pero yo quería compartir rápido, bueno, leer aquí a Samir que coloca que le han tocado pocos participantes que sean LGBT+ en campamentos, pero sí cada vez más niños con capacidades diferentes y eso requiere también una planificación y pensar en términos de seguridad, cómo lo abordamos. Definitivamente mantener el norte claro para poder tener redes de seguridad para todos nuestros niños. Bueno, quedan 10 segundos y nos vemos entonces en la sala principal. Muchas
Un
gracias a
placer
todos
verlos a
por
todos, Me da
participar y
mucho
hacer
gusto verlos a
comentarios.
todos.
Окей, я думаю, это все. Я бы хотела, меня попросили записывать эту комнату, чтобы потом выделить важные мысли. Хотела бы спросить ваше мнение про концепт переосмысления лагеря и что мы должны делать в современном мире для того, чтобы переосмыслить лагерь и создать максимальные условия для развития и поддержки. Перед этим давайте представимся, чтобы понимать, кто у нас здесь. Меня зовут Лиза, я была спикером, и я из Украины.
Всем привет, меня зовут Маша. Я кемпер из Д-кемпа, мне 15 лет. Я была в Д-кемпе уже 4 раза и поеду еще, наверное, столько же, потому что я считаю, что это особое место, где ты себя действительно чувствуешь по-другому и тем, кем ты есть, и люди, которые тебя там окружают, они меняют тебя и твое мировоззрение на настоящий мир. И я считаю, чтобы изменить современные лагеря, надо обращать больше внимания на поведение детей в лагере, на их потребности и на то, как они соблюдают правила.
Спасибо, Маша. ВДЦ «Орленок», если вы присутствуете здесь, можете как-то подать знак. Маша — это одна из наших постоянных участников лагеря, которая сама участвовала в создании правил, которые были у нас изменены немножко, чтобы следовать потребностям и стаффов, и кемперов. Привет, Жень.
Привет.
Женя, что ты думаешь про переосмысление лагеря?
Куда двигаться?
Угу.
Только в лучшую сторону.
Приветствую вновь прибывших. Мы уже представили друг друга и начали обсуждение. Маша — это одна из наших кемперов, детей из лагеря. Она пришла поддержать меня в моей презентации. И мы обсуждаем вопрос, что нужно делать, чтобы переосмыслить лагерь. Не знаю, правильно ли я читаю. Del Germa Orce.
Угу.
Здравствуйте, девочки.
Здравствуйте.
По-моему, русский язык не хорошо.
Do you speak English?
Завтра я понимаю очень хорошо по-русски. Забыла и так. И я хочу слышать ваши разговоры.
Хорошо. Спасибо. Кира — это тоже одна из наших кемперов, детей в лагере ДЭК, который я представляю. И, Кира, может, ты тоже что-то скажешь про концепцию нового лагеря в новом мире?
Для меня ДЭК — это намного больше, чем просто лагерь. Там очень много крутых людей, и 2 недели обычно мало. Я обычно езжу на 2 смены. Вот. Была сколько? 11 раз в ДЭКе. Вот. Очень сильно люблю ДЭК.
Спасибо. Так, кстати, Маша и Кира — это представители тех 94%, которые возвращаются к нам в лагерь. Может, они скажут свои инсайты, почему они возвращаются. Там во время презентации спрашивали секреты, почему дети возвращаются. Я считаю, что только дети могут сказать, почему, потому что все остальное — это наши догадки.
Ну, если ты не поехал в декэмп, например, то не было каникул, не было отдыха, не было тех эмоций, которые есть в декэмпе, и без них очень тяжело.
Спасибо.
Да, как ты иногда живешь от смены до смены, просто если ты уже не поехал, то это такое как-то не сильно интересно уже. Вот.
Полностью поддерживаю. А Женя, это тоже из нашего лагеря, она представитель тех людей, кто был у нас в лагере ребенком, а потом вернулся работать вожатой к нам же в лагерь. Жень, почему ты возвращаешься?
Потому что очень приятно наблюдать за тем, как дети в тебе нуждаются в твоей там поддержке, что ты находишь общение с многими из них, и ты для них потом становишься родным человеком, и там помогаешь им, придумываешь вместе с ними всякие организационные какие-то моменты, они могут посоветовать что-то, то есть ради эмоций, скорее всего, тоже.
Супер, спасибо. А я представитель людей, которые приезжали в лагерь ребенком, потом стали работать вожатой, потом стали работать в руководстве лагеря, и все это в одном лагере. Поэтому для меня лагерь — это не просто место, куда ты приезжаешь, а сообщество и часть твоей жизни, которая поддерживает тебя и сопровождает на протяжении всей жизни и задает вектор твоего развития в этой жизни, твоей коммуникации с другими людьми. Поэтому я считаю, что переосмысление каждый раз концепта лагеря и то, что в нем происходит, это важная задача всех, кто связан с этим, и детей, и взрослых, и тех, кто просто как-либо касается лагеря. Поэтому я очень рада, что мы все здесь были, чтобы послушать наших спикеров. Я думаю, мы можем возвращаться обратно в основной сеанс. Сейчас только...
Okay, now we're good. Does anyone want to start with intros? I don't think I'm leading this. I think we're just like free-flowing.
I can start. So my name is Chloe. I use she, her pronouns, and I work with Camp Waro, which is a camp in Quebec that
It took us all out, but then it sent us back in.
Okay, we're back. So I guess I'll just keep going. I work at Camp Waro, which is a camp in Quebec, focusing on teaching English and French. It's traditionally a all-girls single-gendered camp, quote unquote, and we're working on shifting that and making it more inclusive. So yeah, I also work with Alexandre, who's here. Oh, we can't hear
Alexandre?
you. No, we can. Sorry. It's doing that thing again where like when you start talking, can you tell we work together?
Okay, yeah, we work together. You should hear me now. Yeah, so my name is Alexandre, or Alex, that's fine as well. Work with Chloe at Camp Waro. So like same mission and everything, yeah.
Are you finished, Alexandre? So I am Trudy, and I work at a camp in Ontario in Canada. And my camp is Bellwood Lodging Camp, and it focuses on serving people with intellectual disabilities.
Cool. My name's Chris, and you heard a little bit. I actually live in Vermont, and my program director lives in Ontario.
Sorry, Chris, you're just really, really quiet.
How about this?
I can't hear you for some reason.
Oh, wait. Is that any better?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, I didn't mean to.
I think when it switched the breakout rooms, it like changed my default mic. Anyway, I'm in Vermont, and my program director is from Ontario, so.
Yeah.
Connections to Canada.
And right now, I'm the only not Canadian.
I'm actually American.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I live here. I live in Canada. So I guess we discussed kind of what we took away from this, right? Yeah. Well, Chris, I loved what you were saying about your camp. I really loved how you talked about diversity and equity and inclusion being at the very base of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I thought that was such a perfect way of phrasing it, and something that I think is very, very important to learn and take into account, because emotional, physical safety are also so crucial for us as humans and campers and staff and everything. So I really appreciated that point a lot.
Yeah, and that was I just always like to give credit when I can, that was Monia Johnson, who was at that session. Monia Johnson, and just for the sake of saying it, it was like a collective realization through a conversation we were having. So yeah.
I love that. I think it's definitely something, like the way that John was framing the hierarchy of needs and everything. I was like, wow, I really want to take that into our staff training, and especially with this point that you were bringing forth as well. It felt like, to me, it helped realign like the priorities and everything for camp that could be helpful for staff.
I like the thing that really stuck out to me was you talked about spontaneity. So like in other camps that I've worked at and stuff, I would run a surprise campfire. And so there'd be a hat with a whole bunch of random words in it, and another hat with all the camp counselors' names. And I just really love, so at that point I was just like a counselor when I was running these, and I didn't have any oversight of anything. And it was not taken well, and people really didn't kind of fully engage in that act of spontaneity and the kind of like fun and free-for-allness of it all. And it's really cool that you've been able to make like such a safe space at your camp that was something that people could fully just engage in. And like reflecting on that camp, and even while I was at the camp, I definitely did not have like an exceptionally safe feeling space. And I think that was a reason why that like camp experience really didn't kind of work out that well there. So anyway, I thought that was just like really cool. And yeah.
Yeah, and to jump off exactly what you're saying, something I've never totally vocalized before, but what you said just like clicked something in my brain, which is like when we talk a lot about youth empowerment, but like youth voice and youth idea is like, have you ever talked to children? Like, they don't think the way we do. Like, their ideas are like, they're all over the place, and they're really spontaneous sometimes. And like, I think by like, just philosophically speaking, like embracing spontaneity is a way of embracing like a youth idea construction model, like the way that kids see the world is very spontaneous. So yeah.
I can say like kind of like jumping off of that, like working for a camp that exclusively serves people with intellectual disabilities, often having like a lot of structure is super important for them. And so I'm really kind of like struggling to be able to find places for spontaneity while still being able to provide that like safety of having that schedule, because for a lot of the campers, having that structured schedule is really the bottom of that hierarchy of needs. It provides them that like psychological safety that they need. And so being able to find those places of spontaneity while also balancing having that level of structure and stuff like that is kind of like that teeter-totter balancing act that
that is such a valuable intersection to bring up too, because like we talk about how neurodivergent kids, our model doesn't always like, and so just like making sure that we're not leaving those kids in the dust and leaving them behind, and that's where I kind of think the beauty of summer camps is that they are all different, and hopefully like my camp is not the perfect camp for every kid, but like every kid should find a camp, right? Like there should be a camp out there. So yeah.
No, one of the things that I wrote in my notes, like in big letters, was embracing absurdity. That really resonated with me because that's not really something that we actively do on a daily or even weekly basis at our camp. Like we're very structured in our programming. And I do want to bring a little bit of that more. Obviously, like it doesn't change in one day. It's something you have to implement and bring into your camp culture. But a couple ideas for our staff training, and then of how staff can bring that into our campers experience. And also, like, one of the things that our staff struggle with, oddly enough, is unstructured play. And I think there's something to do with they're not there yet, don't really have a solution, but it's things are sparking in my mind with the
I think that's so common though. Like after you stop being a child, like we don't accept culturally being able to just have that free form play. So we kind of lose that ability as adults to be able to actually do that and comfortably be able to do that. But as kids, we embrace like unstructured play. But as soon as you become an adult, if it's unstructured play, that's not productive. It's not great. So it's like trying to I always struggle with this too, is like trying to remind adults how to actually engage in that unstructured play so that they can model that well for the people that can.
Or even
it's
an unstructured idea or a new idea in what is already an existing structure. So like you're like, oh, here are the rules to this game, and a kid's like, well, could we do it this way? And like I've heard so many times like people are like, well, no, the way we play this game is this way. But like, why? The purpose of the game is for the kids. Like any idea that a kid has, probably other kids have had, and like. Yeah, I mean, like the purpose, we know this, the purpose of the game, the purpose of the activity is not to accomplish, we have played a game of whatever. It's to, it's in servitude to these kids. So like, any way that a kid like views something is like, that's the point. That's the point of camp. Like, yeah.
And that's how games overall just got started. No one had a pre-planned thing. When you all of a sudden randomly add these other like changes of rules and stuff like that, that's how you create new games. That's how we got all of these different crazy odd games like Gaga Ball. Like what an odd game, but it's something great that so many people love.
Yep.
I feel like in my experience, like staff get so attached to like the structure and routine of things that it's so hard to think outside that as well. And like the priority is that people are having fun and feeling good and confident and safe, and not that we're going to all the activities on time, so it's about how we're teaching those values too. I think that would help with that.
Yeah, and something that I'm surprised this word hasn't been brought up yet in any of this is tradition, because I think that like camps have amazing.
Welcome back, people. As people are coming back into the room, we'd love to encourage you to share in the chat some of the takeaways from your conversations. The chat is a wonderful way. I'll send everybody a little reminder to save the chat. You can actually save the chat yourself by just simply clicking on the chat area to save it. So, but if you can share in our chat some of the takeaways from your conversation from the breakout rooms, that'd be wonderful. It's just a nice way to get the pulse of the conversations everywhere. So we have come to the end of our ICF Academy session today. I just want to say thank you for everybody that joined us today. I truly feel that by coming together, sharing knowledge, sharing our experiences is how we make our industry stronger. And the more we can do that, the more we can serve our campers and our staff members and our community. My final thoughts for today is that camp magic is something that has always been hard to explain, but it is why people come back day after day, year after year, and sometimes decade after decade. I would encourage within our organizations to help define what camp magic is. And today, what I've learned is that camp magic, true camp magic, happens when everyone feels like they belong to something special. And when we all feel like we belong, that is what makes it special. And that is camp magic. Before we head out, we do have a couple of announcements for what's next for ICF Academy, what's next for ICF. I'd like to invite my dear friend, mentor, camp legend, and past president, John Jorgensen, Jorgie, to the table.
Wow. Thank you very much, Gabs. You too inspire me, as does this entire team. What a great and inspirational session this was today. Our slogan for ICF is bringing together the world of outdoor experience, and we've certainly done that today, right from around the world. But it's important to remember that we're bringing together more than just part of the world, and we've certainly seen that today. Every child deserves a chance to experience camp, but not just every child of a certain type. And it has been clear that there are ways and there are people who are leading us in that direction, and we must all rise and follow. I wanted to move on to a next slide in relation to some of the things that I picked up. First of all, congratulations, John and Chris and Kiki and Lisa. Thank you for your perspectives and for the good work that you're already doing. Maslow pops up in so many different ways. One of the things that I've come to appreciate is that if we're going to have community actualization, if we're really going to get to a place beyond just what has always been, then we need to be able to help everyone find a place and find the best version of themselves. The original camp elements persist, don't they? Love, trust, honesty, support, and we need to reflect that in everything we do. Camp Reimagined is an everyday or an annual exercise at least, and it's clear as a result of today that camp is a concept, not just a place, and we need to spread that concept everywhere we go. As John was describing, bringing together people and creating that community and what has sprung out beyond that community, it reminds me of our ICDC program, our International Camp Director courses. And the next slide will let you know that we have a number of opportunities for people to gather together with the ICDC. There's a course in Australia for Australian camp professionals, but if you can get there, then you would be welcome. And at every one of our congresses, we will and have always had an international camp directors course, and it is an amazing opportunity to bring together diverse perspectives and to imagine, to build, model and imaginary camps, but in so doing, open up the world of opportunity. If you want more information about the ICDC, there's a lovely video on our website and some great information there. So thanks again to everyone.
Thanks again, Jorg. And for if you enjoyed today, please let us know and share with on social media. The more we can share with other people, the better. Next session that we'll be having, next also slide, River, is marketing the camp experience. This is actually a fairly easy date to remember. In 2022, on the second month of the year, February, the second day, 20, okay, I just said it was easy and now I just confused myself. February 22nd, 2022, marketing the camp experience. We'll be talking about the famous Thanks to Camp and how you can market your camp so that people know about the great work that you are doing. We'll also, next slide, please. We have Thanks to Camp, as I just mentioned. Thank you so much. Next slide. And also, if you would like to use your phones or screenshot so that we can get feedback, we are in service of you. We want to help support you the best way possible, and your feedback helps inform us on that. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate you being here, and take care. See you next time.